I awoke in a cold sweat. After throwing my soaked bed sheets aside, I arose from my bed, knowing I wouldn't sleep again after my most recent nightmare. I don't consider myself frightened easily by them, especially since I have an odd knack of knowing when I am in a dream. But this time was different. The dream began with me standing in a dimly lit residential street, one I recognized, but could not remember from when or where. The scene was devoid of any color, save the dark orange glow of the street lamps that littered the road. As I walked, I wondered just where I was and how I got there, as I had neither my wallet or my phone on my person. At a small road turnoff, I stopped on a street to look around and get my bearings. Abruptly, one of the street lamps far off to my right down the street flickered and shattered. I was quite alarmed at this point, because earlier there was only silence. And then more lamps shattered around me, left and right, until the only one left was the one hanging above me. I could feel my heart beating, and I backed nearer to the only source of light until I was tightly gripping the cold metal behind my back. In the distance, I could hear footsteps moving towards me from directly in front of me, and then more from the pathways left and right of me. It was pitch black all around me, besides the dim lamp above my head, and a part of me knew I was probably in more danger under the lamp than outside in the dark, but I didn't care. The footsteps grew closer and louder, and then I finally saw something enter my protective light dome. At the edge of the lamp's reach, something stood into the light, so I could only see its legs up to the knee. They were black and coarse, almost as if they were made of ash. Around me, 4 or 5 of the creatures entered too, each looking identical to the first. I sunk down along the lamppost until I made contact with the ground, still keeping my hands clasped to it. The initial creature was standing right in front of me, and then took another step. Its movement was rigid and slow, and before I saw its face, I closed my eyes, a secret I often use to wake up from bad dreams, and shut them tight. After a few seconds, I opened them, expecting to be back in reality. Instead, I saw the creature face to face with me, kneeling down, staring directly into my eyes. It was fully black and had a slender human shape, but with no discernible features besides its cold, sunken eye sockets. Paralyzed with fear, I stared back into his face until I noticed that the rest of his group began to kneel down and stare at me too. I watched on in horror as they all looked at me under the lamp. They all whispered something, barely inaudible, in unison. 12:37. I slumped to the floor, suddenly exhausted, and the first creature followed my gaze as I passed out. Back in reality, I had got to my feet and was on my way to get a glass of water before I figured out what to do with the rest of my night. I turned on the light to my hallway and headed downstairs to my kitchen. After a few sips, I noticed the time on the oven timer, 12:37. I laughed about the coincidence, until I heard the light shatter from upstairs.